Have you ever played a game with someone who kept changing the rules right as you were about to win? You make a clever move, and suddenly they invent a new penalty out of thin air. That is exactly the situation Black Americans faced right after the Civil War. While slavery was legally over, Southern states quickly wrote entirely new laws called Black Codes. These were designed to keep people tied to the land through unfair contracts and the constant threat of violence. So, what do you do when the system is actively rigged against you and the rulemakers refuse to play fair? You stop playing. Hundreds of thousands of Black Americans made the decision to pack whatever they had, walk away from the table, and organize a massive effort to start over in places where they could set their own rules. Leaving the South required more than just courage. It required a plan. Families had to coordinate their travel, secure their own land, and find ways to run their own businesses without interference. One of the earliest leaders of this movement was Benjamin Pap Singleton. Singleton was a carpenter from Tennessee who had escaped slavery multiple times, and he saw the post-war South as a dead end for his people. He realized that to truly be free, they needed to live in a place where they owned the soil they worked. He partnered with educated leaders to research locations and organize the logistics of a mass migration. Singleton didn't suggest people just run blindly into the night. He printed promotional posters and organized travel groups, ensuring that when families left, they were heading toward specific colonies he had already scouted. He spread a simple message of self-reliance: move early, build together, and protect the future. By organizing these departures, Singleton demonstrated that relocation was a way to claim independence and finally become their own bosses. By the late 1870s, thousands of people were following this path. They became known as the Exodusters, and many of them headed for the plains of Kansas. This is a homestead certificate. The Homestead Act was a government rule that offered free land to anyone willing to settle on it and farm it for at least 5 years. For people who had been considered property themselves just a single decade earlier, owning the land was a massive shift. Even though they arrived with no money and had to dig their first homes directly into the earth to survive the winter, that dirt was legally theirs to keep. Within a few years, those early dugouts became towns like Nicodemus, Kansas. If you look at this photo, you can see the stone church and the general store, independent spaces built by Black settlers for Black settlers. Turning empty land into a functioning town with its own economy proved that these families could thrive the moment they had total autonomy over their own labor. This movement eventually grew into the Great Migration. Between 1910 and 1970, about 6 million Black Americans packed their lives into suitcases and left the South for cities in the North and West. They were escaping a system called sharecropping. Sharecropping was an unfair arrangement where farmers worked land they didn't own in exchange for a portion of the crops, but high interest rates for seeds and tools kept families in a cycle of endless debt. Meanwhile, factories in the North were hiring for jobs making cars and steel. In the South, a worker might earn 75 cents a day. In a Northern factory, they could earn $5 for that same day of work. Reliable information was key to this move. This young boy is carrying the Chicago Defender, a pioneering Black-owned newspaper that was secretly passed around in the South to tell people which cities were hiring and which trains to take. Families just like the one pictured in this portrait had to coordinate their savings and navigate a dangerously uncertain journey. Many white Southerners tried to block the trains or arrest people just for trying to leave, because they didn't want to lose their source of cheap labor. By moving their families to new cities, these migrants didn't just find better paychecks. They built neighborhoods that became the centers of American music, literature, and political power. Over several decades, millions of people redistributed themselves across the map, lighting up new communities from the Midwest to the West Coast. These travelers weren't just fleeing a difficult past. They were actively pursuing a future they could control. This shift worked because thousands of families looked at the data, saved their wages, and followed the paths cleared by the pioneers who went before them. Black Americans did not wait for the rules of the old game to change. They packed their suitcases, moved across the country, and constructed the schools, businesses, and lives they wanted for their children.